Another picture that really highlights the essay is the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount was the first parliament that Allah had called to be held in Mount Morris Park by the bell tower. The bell tower used to be used in the early days when George Washington was in New York for warning. The British coming, either a warning of a fire or any general warning of the people. So it was a sounding the alarm, so to speak. And Allah was really sounding the alarm. This was the first universal parliament. It was April 30th, 1967. The father had been home after doing 22 months in confinement in the Tombs, Bellevue Hospital, or either Manawa State Hospital. Okay, that was a sojourn of 22 months. So he was gone from us for approximately 2 years, but we said it was the 3 years that Jesus had spent, or the 3 days, Jesus had did in the tomb, which was the equivalent of understanding. So we understood that he had to, solidify himself by concentrating his power and force over the period of 3 days, 3 years, which was equivalent. And the father came home after being arrested in 65, 66, 67. 3 years in terms of calendar. And when the father came home and had that first, as we call, Sermon on the Mountain, it was powerful because if you look at it from his perspective, when he went to jail, it was at any given time no more than 75 of us. And that was centrally in Mecca, Pilon, and Medina. All right, I think it was about 30 in Mecca, maybe 40 or 50, 20 in Medina, 15 in Pilon, at best at the time, early days. And then we really got caught on fire in 65, 66 we became really explosive. And then in 67, we got it real younger. A lot of more younger brothers and sisters came. So when the father came home and he seen the bill, I mean, that wasn't his first appearance. His first appearance after he came home was the day after he came home, March 25th, right out here in front of the Glamour Inn. And that was a good showing of about 75 to 80 brothers and sisters at that time. And he made the announcement. Now, mind you, from 80 to 800 to 1,000 had to be a real significant jump in manifestation term that, okay, the first ones that came that night on the 25th was there real close. And they was mostly went through the ministry process. But the first parliament, you seen what the ministry did. When I say ministry, the administrators, like the firstborn, the first fruit, carried the nation while the father was in the injustice. Forsyth Akbar was on the case. He was like our guardian angel. He was the caretaker of the nation. Shahid at that time was not around. I don't know where he was. He might have been addicted to drugs, like he said, a research monkey was. He was strung out. I don't know. I couldn't say. But I know Justice was there. And all the firstborn, the first fruit. And we was rocking. So when the father come home and see us, bam, he see a nation, from 80 to 800. I don't know the percentage of that, but that's more than a damn near 1,000 percentage. I know if it was 160, that'd be 100%, right? 520, that would be about 500, 400%. But now you got 800 to 1,000, That's damn near 1,000% of increase from the time that he made his first manifestation, March 25th, 67 to April 30th. So I know he could see the explosion of us getting younger. I was knowledge Bill, and like I mentioned, Shaheed and Little Akbar, they was 10 years younger than me. So the disparity in age was damn near a 10-year gap, and the average age was the older guards about my age, 19 at the oldest to maybe 13, and then from 13 to 8, that's another variation of 5 years. So the fathers see this difference, and the youngest brother was Hassan from Medina, and he was about 18 months. He's in one of the pictures on the first mount, and he was about 18 months. But if you look at the picture in proportions, you see us lined up here, maybe in 3 rows, standing on just this side by the bell. To the right and to the left is just as many 3 rows, because remember, we always had a cipher, and the cipher is 360, so we was around the father in the shape of 360, a cipher. So if you see us like this in that row of 4 deep, on the other side is 4 deep, on the other side is 4 deep, and then you had the benches on the mountains, and that's where all the earths and the babies really sat, and then behind them you got 4 deep. So if this is 100 right there, 50 to 75, then you got another 50 to 75, another 50 to 75, then you might have 150 around the benches. And then you still got people coming and people milling. Because if you look at some of the pictures that was on there, the first crew was just Mecca. And that was the first line. Messiah, Yahara, Bismillah, Amin, Dalu, and I was off to the right of Dalu, Aru, Jameg, Jamal, and that was just Mecca. Then the next line, all the other guards behind the first ones I named is from Medina. And they had just came at that particular time when the father started building. Because at first we was there, milling around, so to speak, just sitting around in position looking at the father. And then when more people came and the father got up and started building, then like the cipher was really formed beautifully. And that was the biggest cipher up until that time that I had experienced, you know. And it was a serious vibe, because we was glad to have the father home. And not only was we glad to have him home, but we was glad that he seen all the babies there that we had taught, that we didn't have no fear, that while he was gone, his teachings were strong in us, and we was teaching, civilizing those that we had to teach. And the father loved it. We had pleased Allah. And as he said then, that he seen us teaching because he see all the babies there, and that we had to teach them to rule the world, to take over the world. And I love that, because that gave us the vision, the foresight, that we're going to take this over, that, you know, we like soldiers in an army of righteousness, and unrighteousness ain't supposed to rule. Wickedness ain't supposed to rule. So we supposed to use our sword of justice, as the emblem of justice was the black man, and it was a sword used regularly in Muhammad's time, and we the black man, and we in Allah's time, which was our time. So we're going to use the sword daily, each and every day, in each and every way. And we're going to teach and teach and teach. And we was pleased that Allah was pleased that we was teaching. And it was a great day, you know, and Allah built. And after he finished building, but I just love to emphasize what he said about us teaching, because he see all the babies. So that was a demonstrated fact, that if we wasn't teaching, it wouldn't have been that many people there, nor would have been that many babies there. So he was teaching, and it was many babies there, and he was very pleased with that. And the disparity in age. His primary teachers was teenagers my age. Nobody over 20 or 21. Then those in the middle, like Young God was knowledge God, and Jameg, he was only knowledge, wisdom. And then Akbar and Shaheed and little Haseen. Haseen was 18 months. Akbar and Shaheed was 8 years old. So we was getting to them young, pure. But this is the young getting to the young, pure. And the Father said that we was the purest of the pure. You know, that we was the pure in heart. So he came to us because we wasn't defiled, that we hadn't been marked by unrighteousness, that we didn't know what unrighteousness was, that we was minors, and if anything that we did wrong, we wasn't responsible for, because our parents was responsible for it. But he caught us just because before we obtained our own responsibility at knowledge equality, you know, when we married God, or either knowledge understanding, we became men, then he caught us so that we wouldn't go wrong and do unrighteousness, that we maintain our purity, unlike those that was in the Mars. That those that was in the Mars had already been through the murk and mire of civilization and had done wrong. Not only ate pig, but had did some wrong in society, that they was the dry bones, and Elijah had to save them. As they said at that time, Malcolm X was the epitome of what Elijah saved. Those that was in jail, those was drug addicts, those that was hustler, those that was pimps, and all of that. We wasn't all of that. We was babies, teenagers, never really even been in the law. If anything, we was wayward in our behavior. But we wasn't ex-pimps. If anything, we was high school dropouts. That was the real thing. And that's what the law addressed. Knowledge of self. And after we got knowledge of self, if we didn't have a high school diploma, we had to go back to school and get the GED. But the law went a step further when he hooked up with Dr. Ed Carpenter, who he taught, and his name became God Cop. And we went not only to get the GED, we went back to get a high school diploma. That's how the Father set it up, so we can get the real, actual high school diploma. But anyway, that first parliament, as you can see in that picture, I mean, you had to be up close and personal, and it was so many of us. In that picture, you see the heads of the earth from the back, and they are 4 or 5 deep. And those are only the earth. Behind those earths is gods, and they was 4 and 5 deep. So either brothers, as we was calling them at that time. And on the sides, it was the same in the cipher. So the estimate was 800 to 1,000. And the Father was alarming the world, because after that parliament, we walked the streets with the Father back here to 7th Avenue. And there wasn't no street academy at that time. And the C-Cipher punk powers, or whatever, C-Cipher pig, whatever you want to call them, reacted because they didn't understand the crowd that Allah had traveled with. You know, usually when they seen the crowd, it was a demonstration, a fight, or whatever the case may be. And you're talking about the 60, this 67. In 63 we had a ride, 64 we had a ride, and 65 we had a ride. 66 was relatively calm because the governor was running for re-election, so they had more police in the street. Things was more passive, in that they had a more pacification program going, giving us what we want, to keep quiet and be quiet. Okay, but then 67, things started heated up, that we demanded the Father come home, and the Father came home. Now we in the street again, and there's a big crowd, but the crowd is a peaceful crowd that we just here to see and hear Allah. But the C-Cipher punk didn't understand it till they came and inquired what the crowd was, and the Father dissipated all of their fears and told them who he was. They knew who he was. They already got the police alerts and all that, but he can't maintain the crowd out here. He said, well, then get me a school. And that's the first time I heard he tell the police, you know, then get me a school, someplace where I could take them inside and teach them and get them off the street. And that's when I first heard it. And the next thing you know, that was in April. The next thing you know, you hear that the mayor is trying to contact the Father. And he got contact with him, but the Father ain't paid him no mind. And then eventually he did have a meeting with him in the end of May or either the early June, through a guy named James Lawson. James Lawson was a local politician, and he hooked him and Barry Gartha up. And when they got hooked up, then the father let it be known to Lindsay. Lindsay wanted to know, what did Allah want? You know, and Allah told Barry Gartha to tell the mayor, I wanted a school so I could teach my 5%ers in. And that was the basis that got the ball rolling for us to get this school that we presently sitting in. And things worked out where the father got the school through an agreement, a lease agreement, a 99-year lease agreement at $1 a year. And as I understand it, the father paid $100 and told him to keep the $1 tip, but he paid it in full for 100 years. So we got the school. It was an old barbershop called Alhambra, and this is the Alhambra district. It used to be a movie house. The RKO, one of the biggest movie industry at that time, had the same name. The barbershop had the name. Our first brother that went home, that got assassinated or killed in these streets teaching, his name was Alhambra. We used to call him Alhambra, but his name was Alhambra, and he got killed in this area, and he was the first one to die in the cause, you know, marking our very existence in blood, that this was ours and we ain't going nowhere, and one of us died, and we taking over this part of the land. But that says a lot about what's in the essay, and I don't go into all that detail that I just did, but what's in that essay, that picture speaks a lot. And you got the firstborn up in there, the first fruit, the first administrators. You hear me say minister, but it was administrators that the father wanted us to do, administer the truth unto the people. You know?
If Mecca did this,